The governor of Alabama, Kay Ivey, came out today and made a statement in regards to masks, and she's extending the mask mandate. What happened? What happened? All the sources, even your own personal opinion, Kay, was that you never really agreed with the mask mandate. But under pressure from Democrats and President Joe Biden, Kay Ivey held a press conference Thursday to announce that she will extend the statewide coronavirus mask mandate for an additional 5 weeks. Okay. As of Tuesday, Alabama's 7-day average of new COVID-19 cases was 778 per day. Okay, are we supposed to be scared of that? I don't know. Ivey told a small crowd gathered to hear her remarks at the state capitol. That's an 82% drop from the high we reached on January 10th. Okay, so everything that she was saying to begin here kind of just led everybody to believe that she was going to be lifting the mask mandate. But then, and the lowest new average of daily cases since June. Okay, so what's your justification? We are definitely in the indication that we are moving in the right direction. Okay. Even with positive news, however, both Dr. Harris and Dr. Harris must be their whatever state COVID czar, I suppose, and I are both convinced that we need to get past Easter and hopefully allow more Alabamians. They need to figure out a better term for the Alabaman denomination to get their first shot before we take the next step that some states have taken to remove the mask order altogether and other restrictions. We're not there yet, but goodness knows we're getting closer. Oh, man. Kay, why did you do this? Why did you do this? Okay, you can look over at Texas and realize that, okay, yeah, maybe comparing us to Texas is not fair because the geographics of the place are wildly different than Alabama. You can still look to a place like, well, Mississippi for different population densities, or even South Dakota, but I understand that the climate's a little bit different and everybody's just kind of flying by the seat of their pants and nobody's really figuring out what are the proper markers on how to gauge going forward. I have opinions, but the only ones that you're allowed to espouse on YouTube right now are those of the CDC and the WHO, and I could give a fuck to keep up to date on those, because mostly I just believe that you should be taking care of yourself, and that's the only people you should be worrying about. Let's get to the rest of the statements here. According to Ivey, the new modifier order will ease up restrictions and keep our mask order in place for another 5 weeks through April 9th. But let me be abundantly clear, after April 9th, I will not keep the mask order in effect. Yeah, but this one was only put in place in January, and they didn't have an extension to begin with until they signed another one, so I'm not optimistic that April 9th will be the end of it. Ivey's announcement comes one day after President Biden criticized governors of Mississippi and Texas, and I think that that's a great time to pivot over to Jen Psaki. At least she holds press conferences. They don't offer you anything. They don't really clear up any information. All it does is just gets put back into the circle back pile where all of the questions are starting to mount over there, and eventually the piper is going to have to be paid. And she had to defend yesterday's comment when Joe Biden said, oh, people lifting mask mandates and something science, that's Neanderthal thinking. You should be at home scared and just stay at home and get a Pornhub Pro subscription and just coom all day. If you live in a state with legalized weed, what else do you need? Here's your $1,400 for the quarter. That should pay all your bills. No, let's see what kind of backwards logic this asshole did, because she's such a dick, okay? When she is up there at her little podium on high and her just little condescending answers, if she even bothers to offer any of them, it's more or less just a 5-line dissertation of saying absolutely nothing, not addressing the central point, and then moving on. She could be much more efficient by just saying, I don't know, next. And Biden's not awake right now, so I can't ask him for clarification. But she got asked this question at today's press conference. How does comparing someone to a Neanderthal help convince them to change the course and get on board with your public health message? Well, okay, to be fair, here, I'll play press secretary for Joe Biden right now. To be fair, Joe Biden was probably just confusing Neanderthal thinking with childish thinking, because that was the species at the time when he was a young boy. And what wasn't mentioned in that previous quote was that Joe Biden also said that they would just continue to club everybody over their head with their anti-science rhetoric. So as you could see, Pop-Op was a little bit on a one-way track That's a joke, YouTube. So indeed, Psaki, how does comparing someone to a Neanderthal help convince them to change course and to get on board with your public health message? Hard-hitting question. The behavior of a Neanderthal, just to be very clear, the behavior of was a reflection of his frustration and expiration. Okay, so you stand up there, you reply to that question like a know-it-all asshole, and you don't actually hit on how do you want to start changing minds and opinions. Instead, you just address the most salacious part of this, and that is the problem with her press conferences, okay? She doesn't dig down to anything, and perhaps because she gets the questions provided to her beforehand, we covered that before, and that's what happens. Most, if not all of the questions are pre-screened before they're allowed to be asked. And if that reporter actually wanted an answer to that question, he would have rephrased it differently, but that's not the point of these press conferences either. That is to just get sound bites that you can clip for headlines and that you can just write, a couple 100-word piece, just ship it off, and hence why the state of the media is the current state of the media. But yeah, it's been a little over a month now, and we've just come to expect this. No answers, bad takes, and bad advice. Like, yeah, we could also click on that other box that's just probably right by my head right now that says AOC rages over Texas's opening. Yes, that was as predictable as the sun rising this morning. What would be the point? But we've covered the different science when it comes to masks, okay? Where the regular cloth masks, like the one that Biden's wearing right now, if you keep touching it like he does in every single press conference, it in effect becomes unsterile, therefore unfit for use, okay? You still look good to the crowds. You think that you're doing your part, but for all intents and purposes, it's like putting a gym sock over your face after you're done running a marathon. It metaphorically has the same type of waist that it would have after a Joe Biden speech. So, apt analogy. But to just harken back to the video that we cut, I think on Tuesday, and definitely it carried over to when Kay Ivey was on the get rid of the mask train for the moment, it was the question of, okay, if masks worked so well, why haven't more diseases been eradicated effectively by the use of a mask? That's a question that is often met with stunned silence, mostly because there is one obvious answer. When it all comes down to the government constantly mandating these mask mandates, even though numbers are dropping, levels of antibody and vaccinations continue to rise, hence why there's fewer cases being reported, and hospitalization numbers don't even bother reporting those anymore because they aren't nearly as salacious as the constantly plummeting death numbers. Instead of looking on the bright side of life, Democrats, because the entire messaging and exactly what Biden was running on is there's going to be a dark winter and only I can help you. They want you to be in fear, but then also on the other side of the coin, and there was an interesting comment that I seen and replied to, and I think that it would be imperative to spread this out a little bit more. Okay, to paraphrase the question that I was posed with and felt the need to comment on, it was, why does the government and why do Karens, not actual Karens, but you know, the meme Karen, feel the need to enforce social distancing and mask mandates? Well, okay, if we're to look at this from the other side, and we'll address this point by point, the government just doesn't want to fuck up, okay? They look around and they see what everybody else is doing, and instead of risking their citizens' health, at least how they perceive it, we're in that mindset right now, instead of doing something outside the norm, they will just stick down this narrow path that if you manipulate some numbers, if you look at some different statistics, it could work. And you just want to drill down that path until it's achievable. They are paralyzed by their fear. I don't appreciate that, but I can also understand that that is their thinking. They're waiting for vaccinations to go up. They're waiting for more antibody tests to come back positive where they can achieve a state of herd immunity. They're listening to the experts, and the experts keep shifting the numbers. Therefore, that's why the mask mandates keep going longer and longer. Social distancing practices will be in effect longer and longer, and that is their thinking behind that. And as for the Karens, you know, your concern trolls out there, wear your mask, and you're not 6 feet away. And that's not even just the females with short, dykey haircuts. No. My first Karening was from some 5'7" manlet who didn't think that I should be walking into the Costco produce refrigerator because there was more than 6 people in like a 20 by 20 cooler. And then being a man who's got about a foot and 50 pounds on him, I just said, does it really matter? And then he just kind of turned back around. And that was the end of that conflict because Buddy realized that as men, I have a significant advantage over him. But this is a classic example of somebody thinking on behalf of the group. Somebody thinking that, okay, if I just wear a mask, if I just stand with a 6-foot bubble around me, that is me doing my part to ensure the safety and security of the populace. It's not much for me to do that, okay? Wearing a mask going into a store is fine. Remember, this is just the mindset of this person, this group of individuals. By making these small sacrifices, we will be able to achieve a state of normalcy a lot quicker. And if something gets thrown off because of that, because somebody else is not seceding that little bit of freedom, they are taking away from the collective good. Now, traditionally, these people are a lot more caring of individuals, and their scope and their perception of the world is a lot more broad than just a traditional family structure, okay? Because your group of people that you care about, your group of people that you trust, is probably fairly tight-knit and might be, between 5, maybe 10 people at most. You probably care a lot about your closest friends as well as your mother, your father, your grandmother, your aunts, your uncles. I think probably a dozen might be the cap. Well, these people see a much larger group of people as people that they need to care about, marginalized groups. They might be a certain activist in a certain space. It might be their children's friends who over the summer they might have deprived them of a proper birthday party. And like somebody I used to work with, one of their kids was having their 4th or 5th birthday. I can't quite remember. But instead of just having a traditional party or even just a small gathering with their grandparents, no, they had a drive-by party where it was their friend was going to sit in the back seat of the car, roll down the window. They were going to have a brief conversation, hand over the present, and then just continue the motorcade along. Even just hearing it described sound, well, to steal a Biden phrase, Neanderthalic. It's looking around at every problem as a nail, and because you've been walking around with a hammer all your life, you think that there is one solution to every problem. And that's what happens when you're caught in that scope, and it is all about mindset. And that's what this boils down to, okay? The underlying cause of all of these mask mandates, of the social distancing, of really why we are finding ourselves in this current state of being, is that on one side of the aisle, you have your authoritarians, and then on the other side, you have your libertarians, okay? And we're all different shades of that, and it just so happens that the authoritarians are very, very, very much in power. And why that's the case? It wasn't always the case because, okay, yeah, COVID started under Donald Trump. Okay, as not somebody I would consider an authoritarian, your mileage may vary. But the libertarians seceded control of the institutions, the media, a long time ago. So what is the constant messaging of people who are not as plugged into this stuff as you and I? Well, if you don't mask up, you're killing grandma. Ergo, that's the reason why we find ourselves here. They have their stormtroopers out in force, ensuring that everybody adheres to all of the, quite frankly, debunked methodologies out there right now. So the only option we're left with is just building our own outlets, I suppose. And if they keep taking it from you, well, you just got to keep digging down deeper until they can't take anything else from you. Because eventually they'll get bored and start metastasizing their own side. That's the good thing about being an authoritarian. You can never be authoritarian enough. So there's always people to call off that herd. But yeah, maybe this got a little bit too esoteric when it comes to just Joe Biden dropping, I guess, prehistoric slurs and an octogenarian governor walking back her mask mandate. Well, at least the removal of it. But it's an important conversation to have, and it's an important topic that you should think of, at least in my opinion. The only way that you can inspire change is by understanding both sides of the conversation, using your values, your non-negotiables, to decide what side you're on, and then formulate the choice, or rather formulate the phrasing that led you to make that choice. And you won't be able to convince everybody that that's the right way to go, but that is the best advice I can give when it comes to combating people with negative mindsets. Now we got to talk about some legislation that's been passed over the past, there we go, 24 hours. It's a doozy, but we'll get through it as well. I thank you all very much for the gift of your time. I've been Don Consuelo. I want you to follow your gut and get after it. Take care, everyone.